Alcohol, a word that today conjures images of celebration, escape, and sometimes tragedy. But behind the bottles and glasses lies a story stretching across millennia. Our journey begins not in a brewery or distillery, but in the wild, where early humans likely encountered the intoxicating effects of fermented fruit left too long in the sun. Imagine a curious ancestor picking up an overripe fruit and feeling a strange warmth spread through their body. This simple accident marked the dawn of alcohol in human history. By 7000 BCE, Neolithic villages in Jiahu, China, were already fermenting a mixture of rice, honey, and fruit. This wasn't just about getting drunk. Alcohol had spiritual and medicinal significance. It connected the living to the divine, cured ailments, and preserved calories in a world where food was scarce. Across the globe, ancient societies independently discovered fermentation. In the Middle East, early Sumerians brewed barley beer and even documented recipes on clay tablets. In Egypt, beer and wine flowed through temples and tombs offered to both gods and pharaohs. Alcohol quickly became more than sustenance. It became ritual. In Greece, wine was linked to Dionysus, god of ecstasy and madness. The Romans embraced it with similar fervor, turning their banquets into expressions of social status and power. Wine was diluted with water, spiced, and sweetened. To drink too much was uncivilized, unless you were a barbarian or celebrating a victory. Meanwhile, in the Andes, native peoples fermented corn to make chicha. In sub-Saharan Africa, sorghum and millet beers were central to ceremonies. In India, texts as old as the Vedas mention soma and sura, intoxicating drinks consumed by priests and warriors alike. Alcohol, it seemed, was a universal thread woven into the fabric of human life. But as alcohol spread, so did concerns. Ancient Chinese emperors regulated production. Islamic scholars debated its moral impact. Some cultures embraced moderation, others prohibition. Still, alcohol persisted. It adapted, evolved, and traveled across continents. The story was just beginning. As civilizations advanced, so did their methods of alcohol production. Distillation, a process that concentrates alcohol, emerged in the first millennium CE. Though its exact origins remain debated, many point to Arab alchemists who sought to isolate the spirit of wine. The Arabic word al-kul, which once referred to a fine black powder, eventually gave us alcohol. Ironically, Islamic scholars who perfected distillation often belonged to cultures that forbade drinking. By the 12th century, distilled spirits had reached Europe and everything changed. Monasteries began producing medicinal tonics, elixirs combining herbs and alcohol to cure ailments. These concoctions weren't meant for parties. They were early pharmaceuticals, yet their potency didn't go unnoticed. Soldiers, travelers, and workers quickly adopted them, finding both warmth and courage in a small glass. The Renaissance sparked a revolution in alcohol's identity. In Italy and France, winemaking became an art. In Germany, beer purity laws reflected a growing concern with quality. Brandy and whiskey appeared. Vodka spread through Eastern Europe. Spirits were now political, economic, and cultural forces. Colonial powers brought their beverages with them. Wine to the Americas, rum to the Caribbean, gin to India. But alcohol didn't just follow colonialism, it enabled it. On the West African coast, European traders exchanged spirits for slaves. Rum fueled the transatlantic triangle trade, while indigenous populations across the globe were introduced to powerful liquors with devastating consequences. In North America, alcohol became a tool of exploitation, among native tribes, fracturing communities and deepening dependence. Back home, Europe grappled with its own crises. The gin craze of 18th century England saw poor Londoners drown their sorrows in cheap, potent spirits. Crime soared, so did mortality. William Hogarth's engravings, Beer Street and Gin Lane, captured the chaos, beer as healthy tradition, gin as social decay. Lawmakers responded with taxes, licenses, and campaigns for temperance. Yet, alcohol endured. It shifted shape, switching from a divine gift to a national problem, from medicine to menace. And still, it was everywhere, in royal courts, in poorhouses, in sacred rituals, and backroom taverns. Humanity was intoxicated, sometimes willingly, sometimes tragically. By the dawn of the 19th century, alcohol had become a double-edged sword. It was both daily companion and dangerous vice. As the Industrial Revolution reshaped cities and labor, workers sought refuge in pubs and saloons. Drinking became part of the urban rhythm, celebrated at weddings, mourned at funerals, and relied upon after grueling shifts in factories and mines. But not everyone was toasting. Across Europe and North America, reformers, many of them women, began sounding the alarm. Alcohol, they argued, was destroying families, fueling violence, and trapping the working class in cycles of poverty. In the United States, the temperance movement took root. What began as a call for moderation soon evolved into demands for total abstinence. Activists like Carrie Nation stormed into bars with hatchets. Religious leaders preached sermons against demon rum. Politicians took notice. By the early 20th century, pressure mounted for legal action. And in 1920, the United States enacted the 18th Amendment, ushering in prohibition. But banning alcohol didn't end drinking. It only drove it underground. Speakeasies, secret bars often hidden behind false walls or under basements, flourished. Organized crime syndicates rose to power, trafficking bootleg liquor across the country. Figures like Al Capone became household names, symbols of both glamour and brutality. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, countries took different paths. In the Soviet Union, Lenin initially restricted alcohol, linking it to the excesses of the old regime. But Stalin later revived vodka as a tool of control and revenue. In Scandinavia, governments introduced strict regulation systems, limiting sales to state-run stores. Science, too, played a role in reshaping our relationship with alcohol. Studies began to explore its effects on the body and mind. Medicine distanced itself from using alcohol as treatment, except in anesthetics or disinfectants. Psychologists warned of dependence. Doctors cautioned against liver damage and fetal harm. By the mid-20th century, a new awareness had dawned. Alcohol was no longer just a personal choice. It was a public health issue. Governments launched education campaigns. Advertisements were regulated. Drunk driving became a punishable offense. Alcohol, once a symbol of freedom, was now something to be managed. Still, it never disappeared. In fact, it adapted. Beer became lighter, cocktails more creative, wine more accessible. Advertising painted alcohol as a lifestyle, sophisticated, adventurous, sexy. Pop culture embraced the image. James Bond's martini, Hemingway's daiquiris, Sinatra's bourbon. We were not done with alcohol, and it was certainly not done with us. By the late 20th century, alcohol was entrenched in modern identity. It filled our movies, our music, and our milestones. It flowed at weddings, graduations, office parties, and holidays. A glass of champagne became a symbol of celebration, a shot of whiskey, of resilience. But as drinking became ever more normalized, cracks began to show. In the 1980s and 1990s, public health data painted a troubling picture. Rising rates of alcohol-related liver disease, drunk driving fatalities, and youth binge drinking led to stricter regulations. Governments worldwide responded with warning labels, age restrictions, and public awareness campaigns. Bars and clubs adapted, breathalyzers became commonplace, designated driver campaigns entered pop culture. Yet paradoxically, the alcohol industry was booming. Global brands like Budweiser, Heineken, and Absolut reached every corner of the planet. Marketing became more targeted, more sophisticated. Alcohol wasn't just sold, it was sold as experience, as identity. Whether through edgy beer commercials during the Super Bowl or romanticized wine tastings in vineyards, the message was clear. Alcohol was no longer just a drink, it was who you were. Craft culture soon emerged in response. In the early 2000s, microbreweries, artisanal distilleries, and natural winemakers exploded onto the scene. These small producers pushed back against mass-market uniformity, offering unique flavors, experimental blends, and stories rooted in place and tradition. Drinking became an exploration. Connoisseurship replaced consumption. A pint was no longer just a pint. It was an expression of values. At the same time, social shifts were reshaping our relationship with alcohol. Millennials and Gen Z began to drink less than previous generations. Wellness culture, fitness trends, and mental health awareness contributed to a rise in sobriety and moderation. Sober curious became a buzzword. Non-alcoholic beers, spirits, and mocktails flooded the market. Suddenly, it was possible to enjoy the ritual of drinking without the alcohol itself. Religion, too, continued to play a role. In predominantly Muslim countries, strict prohibitions remained, though black markets and underground scenes often thrived. In Buddhist regions, monastic traditions emphasized abstinence. In the West, churches sometimes offered wine during communion, but elsewhere promoted temperance or total abstinence. Cultural norms shaped how and when alcohol was accepted or condemned. Meanwhile, alcohol still remained a powerful political and economic force. In some countries, it was a major source of tax revenue. In others, a growing burden on public health systems. Policymakers faced a dilemma: how to balance personal freedom, cultural tradition, and social cost. And through all of this, the story of alcohol remained as complex as ever. It could bring people together or tear families apart. It could mark joy or mask pain. It was a blessing and a curse, a tool and a trap. As humanity stood on the brink of a new century, one thing was certain: the story of alcohol was far from over. In the 21st century, alcohol stands at a crossroads. We've inherited thousands of years of rituals, recipes, and regrets. But now, we're asking different questions. Why do we drink? What does it do to us? And can we imagine a world without it? Science has pulled back the curtain. Advances in neuroscience and psychology reveal just how deeply alcohol affects our brains. It impairs memory, alters mood, and rewires reward systems. Long-term use can lead to dependence, depression, and disease. But science has also shown us how cultural context, social environment, and personal history shape drinking behavior. We now understand that alcohol is not just a chemical, it's a mirror of who we are. Public discourse has shifted. Documentaries, memoirs, and online communities have challenged the myths. No, alcohol doesn't make you more creative. No, it won't fix your heartbreak. And no, you don't need it to have fun. Movements like Dry January, Sober October, and alcohol-free influencers have normalized abstinence. What was once stigmatized as boring or antisocial is now often seen as empowered and intentional. Still, many societies continue to grapple with contradiction. In some places, alcohol is glamorized, in others, demonized. In wealthy countries, it's often a symbol of status, expensive wines, craft cocktails, exclusive tastings. In poorer regions, it's both an escape and a problem. Homemade brews, unregulated spirits, alcohol-related poverty, and violence. The disparity is real, the impact unequal. Meanwhile, technology is creating new frontiers. Synthetic alcohols are in development, molecules designed to mimic the buzz without the harm. Digital health tools track consumption and provide personalized feedback. Virtual reality hosts alcohol-free bars for people in recovery. The very idea of drinking is being reinvented. Yet for all this innovation, one truth remains. Alcohol is deeply human. It has marked our births and deaths, victories and defeats, loves and losses. It's been our medicine and our poison, our friend and our enemy. It has built empires and destroyed them. Its story is our story. So, where does that leave us? Perhaps not with a final answer, but with a better question. One we must each answer for ourselves. What role should alcohol play in our lives? That's the beauty of history. It doesn't dictate, it illuminates. It invites reflection, not judgment. And in the case of alcohol, it reminds us that what we hold in our glass is more than just a drink. It's a legacy,